I would not want people to think of this as a story literally about a robot, because it's really about a mind which is robotic, which is really a reference to limited, linear, rigid thinking.
We ended up short a director at one point because kind of scheduling conflicts forced one of our directors to leave the project. And so Andy and Larry suggested, well, why don't we get Peter Chung, get that Eon Flux guy.
The time when I was developing Eon Flux, I was actually working on Rugrats for Nickelodeon. And I found the Rugrats characters to be very limiting in what they could do. I mean, they're very squat and short, and they had short legs, and they're babies. And so I wanted to go completely the opposite direction and create characters that were very athletic and acrobatic and had long limbs. And also, at the time, I was looking at a lot of expressionist art, like Egon Schiele.
He was doing what I was doing, which was, taking the influence from a distance, trying to put it into our work, and then trying to shove it out to the American public. And the difference that he did with Flux as compared to what I did with Spawn was, I didn't quite change the drawing style nearly as dramatically as he did. And that might have been the one thing that, again, we weren't quite prepared. You got to sort of ease the American public into change, if you will.
That stuff was so nice to see on television. I mean, because it was violent, sexy, and cool.
He might have been just a little bit ahead of his time. If he was doing Aeon Flux now, I got a feeling it would be, a lot more successful, because now we understand sort of anime.
They said they wanted action. At that point, I had a couple of ideas I thought about and pitched them. I came up with the idea that just as in the Matrix, in the original movie, humans are immersed in an artificial world created by the machines. What if the machines were immersed in a world created by the humans?
He's a really good writer. He wrote a very kind of philosophical look at the story, kind of the explanation, the kind of deconstruction of Matriculated. He gave us that, and then he gave us the actual story.
I think I was lucky because I came in late in the process, and I think probably they had achieved a lot of what they were after with the earlier directors. And so coming in late, I was able to pretty much do what I wanted. The disadvantage I had was that I didn't have a lot of time. The main challenge was in creating a robot subject, a robot character that came across as a living, thinking, feeling consciousness. The human characters, they're pretty much the way I always draw humans, so that was easy. But the robot had to have the right look of menace, but at the same time, a look of innocence. And there was a very strict rule that it could not have a human face or have human anatomy. I literally spent months designing and redesigning and revising the robot design.
Peter is a 2D guy. And he said to me at one point, you draw a person walking across a room 100 times, that's it. It's lost its effulgence, it's lost its fascination.
It was such a relief to use 3D elements because I'm used to doing everything by hand and drawing it, every pose, every frame. And allowing the computer to do a lot of the drudgery was just a tremendous relief. I mean, you still have to animate the characters by hand. The computer generates the image, but the performance and the gesture all has to be placed frame by frame.
Because Matriculated is, in many ways, the most abstract and the most demanding, I think, probably, of the audience.
And it's certainly the most psychologically challenging. I mean, it deals with hallucinations.
He's taking you on a trip. Not just the psychedelic aspects of it, it's something that's the kind of thing that Peter feels and thinks about, which is, let's look at it from a totally different point of view.
Every night when we dream, we immerse ourselves into an artificial world of our own making, and they're very convincing. So I thought, well, what if a machine could be put inside a human dream? I felt completely free to make it, as as wild and colorful and unpredictable as a dream.
The piece is really the anti-matrix. In Matriculated, there is the real world, but then there is the world inside the human mind, which is completely internally interpreted world. So it's going to be a gigantic challenge to let the audience in on what the humans are letting the machines in on.
A good deal of Matriculated takes place in this imagined world. So I was attempting to go with more hard-edged and more reality-based music for the real world sequences. And for the imagined sequences, I approached it with a very kaleidoscopic kind of synthesizer, sampler-based sounds that do not reference to actual instruments.
I mean, each of those worlds they go through has to be its own, it is its own sound world. I mean, it's its own symphony, you know, with its own set of instruments. It's kind of like it has to be real, but it has to be abstract at the same time. Last week I was in the studio recording all of these sounds. We built all these contraptions, and I'm in there squeaking and whooshing and swinging and turning and, you know, making all these crazy sounds.
I sort of see the robot as an innocent. And in the end, my hope is that you maybe start to feel a little bit of empathy for it.
It's very Peter.